The National Desk, America's News, now.
Tonight, major disruptions continue even as Beryl gets downgraded. Coming up, where millions are under flood alerts and in the dark.
President Biden is the nominee, and we support the Democratic nominee that will be Donald Trump.
Democrats try to unify around a defiant President Biden, who says he will not step aside. What House Democrats are saying as the White House releases more details on Biden's health. Then inflation fears persist as families cope with high prices, while one major retailer is sued for artificially raising their own. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Tracking Beryl, now downgraded to a post-tropical depression, yet still bringing heavy rains and sustained winds of up to 30 miles an hour. We're looking at the lower Missouri and mid-Mississippi valleys and also the Great Lakes states. As the storm travels north, 25 million Americans under flood alerts. Over the next 3 days, the National Weather Service says there is a greater than 15% chance for flooding from Springfield, Missouri, all the way to Maine. There's also an increased risk for tornadoes tonight in the lower Ohio Valley in association with the remnants of Beryl. Meanwhile, Texas is still reeling from the effects of Beryl hitting yesterday. There have been at least 7 deaths reported so far, and more than 2 million Texans are still without power. Officials believe it will be days before they can fully return power to southeast Texas. Leading the recovery effort is Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, as Governor Abbott is overseas. The National Desk's Michael Atkinson is in Bryan, Texas, with more.
With more than 2 million Texans still without power just a day after Hurricane Beryl's landfall, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick says he's spoken with President Joe Biden for federal assistance on the hurricane cleanup.
He said yes, and so we have agreed to that, and we are appreciative that the federal government has stepped in, and they will pick up most of the cost as we go through recovery here of the storm.
Patrick has been the acting governor since last week, with Governor Greg Abbott out of the country for a trade mission for the entirety of the hurricane. Earlier this morning, Patrick was briefed on the hurricane response at the Texas Division of Emergency Management, or TDEM, facilities in Bryan. I asked him there about Governor Abbott's absence.
Has Governor Abbott's absence at all hindered the response from the state?
No, that's, he and I have worked together now for 9 years as governor, lieutenant governor, and I've been involved in all these situations before, just not as the lead on the team, but he's been in touch with me, he's been in touch with the states.
In recent weeks, both Patrick and Abbott have called for continued investments in the energy grid. ERCOT, which manages the grid, says Texas will need to nearly double its power supply by the end of the decade. Patrick has made fervent calls for grid investments, but tells me the millions without power from Hurricane Beryl shouldn't blame the grid.
What do you want to see done in the future?
So we have to disconnect those two issues. Being out of power from the storm is not related to what we need to do for the grid, which is a totally separate issue. The storm took lines down, took transmission lines down.
In the briefing this morning here at TDEM's facilities in Bryan, Lieutenant Governor Patrick called attention to the fact that folks were coming from all across the state to respond to Hurricane Beryl, some even from West and East Texas, others, including one individual, from all the way in Florida. In Bryan, I'm Michael Atkinson reporting.
Michael, thank you. And the remnants of Beryl also impacting travel across the country again. More than 4,400 flights have been delayed today, and more than 400 have been canceled. The Houston Bush International, still the airport most affected, with over 30% of its flights disrupted so far. Overnight, President Biden's doctor releasing his first statement since Biden's shaky debate performance earlier this month. Dr. Kevin O'Connor said that Biden has not seen a neurologist outside of his 3 annual physicals since entering the White House, and clarified that recent trips to the White House by an expert on Parkinson's were not to meet with the president. The statement coming in response to growing questions over the president's health. Meantime, on Capitol Hill, closed-door meetings between several House Democrats to discuss President Biden's ability to win in November and serve another 4 years. Only a handful of House Democrats have called on the 81-year-old to exit the race. Most are seemingly sticking by him.
He's going to be our nominee, and we have to make the best of a complicated situation.
My takeaway is great sadness that we are not having a conversation about the fact that we have two people running for president. One of them has a record that anybody would be proud to have, and the other one is an adjudicated rapist, a twice impeached convicted felon.
That said, members who do support Biden say they are concerned the age issue will continue to be a, quote, huge distraction this election year. And tonight, a new poll reveals a majority of Americans support access to abortions no matter the reason. According to the AP NORC poll, 7 in 10 say they believe abortions should be legal in all or most cases, while about 3 in 10 advocate for a total ban. The poll also finds that Americans largely oppose the strict abortion bans that have gone into effect in many states since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade 2 years ago. This as the RNC moves to pivot their national platform to reflect those attitudes and their nominee. Kayla Gaskins has more.
The Republican National Committee altering its stance on abortion. The newly released official party platform notably does not call for a national ban, as it has for the past 4 decades, instead aligning with Donald Trump's stance.
I think our platform has to reflect our nominee and our nominee's position.
That abortion should be a state-level decision.
As far as the abortion is concerned, it is now back with the states, and it's bringing it back to the vote of the people, which is what everybody wanted.
SBA Pro-Life, one of the nation's largest pro-life organizations, supporting the platform, pointing to the RNC including, "We believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process."
The very critical thing in that platform, again, was reaffirming its commitment to the unborn life through the 14th Amendment.
SBA Pro-Life Vice President Marilyn Musgrave conceding they would like to see a federal abortion ban reinstated in future platforms.
I think that reasonable limits on abortion would be very agreeable with the public, and I would love to see that.
Meanwhile, Democrats see abortion as a weak spot for Trump politically.
We know Trump will sign a national abortion ban if he gets the chance, but we won't let him.
The Biden campaign releasing relentless slews of attack ads.
And now she has a politician like Donald Trump telling her what she's supposed to do in this situation.
I was turned away from 2 emergency rooms. That was a direct result of Donald Trump overturning Roe v. Wade. He will let women and doctors be punished.
Party platforms are symbolic and not binding for members. Still, this change sends a message. Trump continues shaping the GOP in his image. And Amira, the full RNC will have to vote to officially confirm the new platform at the party's convention in Milwaukee next week.
Kayla, also interesting is the fact that the RNC also softened the party position on same-sex marriage. So how did that change? What does it now say?
Well, they removed the language that says marriage is between one man and one woman. So now instead, the platform says the party promotes a culture that values the sanctity of marriage, the blessing of childhood, the foundational role of family, and supports working parents. While in power, Trump's White House did say he supported same-sex marriage. A platform committee member did anonymously also tell NBC News the reality of the situation is this party platform reflects modern-day realities. Amira?
Yeah, certainly some big changes there. Kayla Gaskins reporting for us from Washington, D.C. Thank you so much. Over 2,000 pounds of frozen chicken now being recalled due to listeria risk. Routine testing of Alsafa U.S. imported frozen ready-to-eat chicken found the possible bacteria. The impacted products were produced in Canada and shipped to retailers nationwide. The USDA says there have been no reported illnesses, but consumers should throw away any products they may have right now or return them from the stores in which they were purchased. A new scam is targeting iPhone users in the U.S. The software company Symantec says cybercriminals are sending text messages that say they're from Apple. The messages say to click a link to sign into your iCloud account in an attempt to steal your Apple ID. Apple says it will never send a link and then ask for your password for a device passcode or 2-factor authentication code, so keep that in mind. Jury selection in Alec Baldwin's involuntary manslaughter trial is now underway over the deadly 2021 shooting of cinematographer Helena Hutchins, who died on the set of the movie Rust. Baldwin has argued he did not pull the trigger but FBI testing of the prop gun indicates that he would have had to. The trial is scheduled to last 10 days. Coming up, as extreme heat blankets the country, why California officials are telling some residents to steer clear of the ocean. Then what lawmakers are telling everyday Americans about why their cost of living is so high. And it often takes too long for dangerous products to be recalled. The latest progress on the push for transparency. Several large wildfires are burning in the West. Officials in Oregon warning that peak fire season could be fast approaching. In California, the lake fire in Santa Barbara County that began on Friday has now burned more than 26,000 acres, sparking evacuation orders for an area of around 86,000 acres. That includes where Michael Jackson's former Neverland Ranch is located. The fire is 12% contained. And more than 160 million Americans now under a severe heat alert impacting both coasts, and dozens of daily record high temperatures are forecast in California and also in Nevada this week. Despite the heat, the LA County Health Department is telling residents to avoid cooling down at 14 local beaches today because of high bacteria levels. That includes places like Topanga Canyon Beach in Malibu and the waters near the Santa Monica Pier. World leaders are gathering today for the first day of the NATO summit in Washington, D.C. Leaders plan to bolster support for Ukraine in its third year of defense against Russia. The world's largest security organization is also set to reinforce its partnership in the Indo-Pacific. Leaders from Japan, South Korea, New Zealand, and the Deputy Prime Minister of Australia attending the summit. On the ground in Cairo, CIA Director Bill Burns meeting with Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi to discuss the ongoing crisis in Gaza. This as optimism around the once hope-filled ceasefire deal has started to wane. Al-Sisi reportedly reiterated Egypt's firm stance against the ongoing military operations in Gaza, now underway for over 9 months, emphasizing the responsibility to end the eruption of heavy violence that began after Hamas's October 7th attack. The president also pushed for humanitarian aid and relief in Gaza to alleviate a catastrophic humanitarian situation, with concerns tonight that it could worsen after another round of Israeli military bombardment in Gaza City. This video here showing Palestinians leaving that area in the old city, forced to flee to avoid being caught in the crossfire. Tens of thousands walking on foot to other areas have been displaced again, and for some, it is their 7th time having to move. 90% of people in Gaza are now homeless due to the hostilities and the destruction. Gazans are not permitted to leave Gaza itself, despite the heavy bombing and artillery. Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell was on Capitol Hill on Tuesday to brief lawmakers on the state of the central bank's fight against inflation. He said though the labor market is cooling down, he and his colleagues are still waiting for more reassuring data that inflation is dropping. National correspondent Atrel Nashar has more on how Congress is confronting the issue.
The top kitchen table issue top of mind on Capitol Hill.
Americans are pissed off.
The rapid rise in the cost of living since the pandemic, weighing down budgets for people like Erin Wiggle, a Pennsylvania mom of 11.
With the paper products and dairies and meats going through the roof, we easily blow through our grocery budget within the first 2 weeks of the month.
Ahead of the election, polls consistently rank inflation as a top issue for voters. There's a clear political divide among lawmakers about the source of the problem. Democrats point to corporate greed.
From July of 2020 to July of 2022, corporate profits in the United States of America rose 75%, 5 times the rate of inflation.
Republicans blame government spending and regulation.
I hate it for the American people, and I just hope the people up here in Capitol Hill will get out of the dang way and let people live.
Inflation's hurting households and small business owners. A new poll by the National Federation of Independent Business found inflation remains their top problem. Daniel Lee owns a fast casual pasta restaurant in Philadelphia. High supply costs force him to make tough choices.
A lot of them get very upset when their portion sizes are shrunk or when the prices are increased, and they tend not to return.
Even massive chains are not immune to this. Some Chipotle customers, skeptical about portion sizes, are using their phones to record their orders being made as sort of a pressure tactic to make sure they're getting the right amount of food.
Today, I'm going to be trying the Chipotle phone method.
That's it? Such a squeaky.
It even triggered a response from the CEO.
The whole thing's a little silly. It actually kind of really bums me out when people, frankly, do this videoing thing, because it's a little rude to our team members.
Frustration and finger pointing all around, with almost everyone saying it's all they can do just to keep up. In Washington, I'm Atrel Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Atra, thank you. And Walmart must now face a class action lawsuit that alleges the retail giant used deceptive pricing in its stores. A Chicago federal appeals court recently issued a ruling allowing consumers to prove the company violated consumer protection laws. Now, in 2022, Ohio man filed a lawsuit claiming he purchased multiple items from the retail store and found they were marked 10 to 15% above the price listed. A lower court dismissed the case last year, ruling the company denied any unfairness due to inaccurate shelf pricing. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
There's this misperception that, well, because marijuana is now legal, that I can just walk around and smoke it wherever I want in the public, which isn't the case. But then how do you actually enforce it as a law enforcement officer? And it's been a challenge so far.
Cincinnati FOP President Ken Kober hopes a bill in the Ohio House will ease some of those challenges. Lawmakers are looking to bring rapid saliva tests to police cruisers across the state.
It's literally a roadside test where you put a cotton swab or a swab under the person's tongue, hold it there for 30 seconds. You seal it, you send it to a lab.
Police would get the results back 24 hours later and be able to tell how much marijuana is in someone's system. Colbert says the results are a lot more specific than current tests.
Leela Gill's Hopkinton apartment has a front row seat to all things nature.
The field and trees, and I love it. I'm very grateful for that.
But wildlife is far and few between.
This is a big bear.
Until now.
I got up and walked towards the window, which, by the way, is only about 7 feet from me.
And when she looked out, a black bear was looking right back at her.
Sudden, bam, this big brown furry thing filled my window.
Immediately captured by his size. And his demeanor, capturing these photos of the surprisingly curious and unsurprisingly hungry animal.
State Route 11 runs north from Burlington toward the coast, but a section of this highway created a danger for drivers when the asphalt heaved up as temperatures climbed.
So our crews were dispatched and found that the concrete panels under the asphalt had buckled due to the heat.
Farmers in the area say the roads have been damaged before by excessive heat, which can create problems for their equipment.
It does create a bit of a problem for traffic, especially with the tractors, because we haven't got a lot of suspension. And so when you're driving over the humps, you kind of get a lot of movement, and there's a lot of product flying around and things getting broken.
WashDOT got the road hazard patch, but now crews are on the lookout for similar issues as the hot weather sticks around.
Coming up, our team investigates why it often takes far too long for the government to let Americans know when a product is unsafe. For more than a year and a half now, Spotlight on America has been investigating why it takes so long for a dangerous product to be recalled, even after the government knows about serious injuries and even deaths. National investigative correspondent Angie Moreski continues to press for answers and learns that a push for more transparency is making little progress.
Instead of planning his party, I was planning a funeral.
For the past year and a half,
my days feel very empty. She should still be with us.
Spotlight on America has reported on multiple deaths.
Every moment was special with him. At the time, I just didn't know how much.
And injuries.
They should have been protected. This shouldn't have happened.
The painful, tragic consequences when product recalls were delayed, even after the government knew the products were hurting and killing children.
If you look at the rock and play, the delay there costs lives.
Consumer Product Safety Committee Commissioner Rich Trumka has been a prominent voice at the agency tasked with protecting the public from dangerous products.
I am a big proponent of warning the public when I know about a hazard, because if there's a risk that our government knows about, it needs to share that with us.
But too often, that doesn't happen. The CPSC cites a provision of the Consumer Product Safety Act, Rule 6B, often called the gag rule, which limits the agency's ability to warn the public without first getting the consent of the product manufacturer.
If I knew a product was killing people right now, I couldn't tell you.
CPSC Commission Chair Alex Owen-Sarek made that startling statement to Spotlight on America more than a year ago when he first proposed changes to the agency's internal rules to beef up its ability to warn the public. But those efforts have stalled, the CPSC telling Spotlight on America staff is working on rewriting the proposed changes and there is no update. Meantime, Dreamland Baby, a company that makes weighted infant sleep products, is threatening to sue the CPSC, alleging the agency violated Rule 6B and is hurting its business. That after the CPSC put out a warning in April that weighted sleep products are not safe for infants, and telling Spotlight on America they are aware of multiple fatalities associated with the products. The CPSC did not name Dreamland Baby in its warning, and the company has not been publicly identified as the cause of death in any incidents.
Consumers want safety.
U.S. Senator Richard Blumenthal says the threat of lawsuits can have a chilling effect on a small agency like the CPSC and believes Rule 6b should be repealed. Last year, he introduced legislation to do that, the Sunshine in Product Safety Act.
The need for that kind of reform is made absolutely obvious and compelling by these kinds of really unfounded threats.
But just like the CPSC proposed rule changes, the Sunshine in Product Safety Act also is stalled, lacking bipartisan support. While efforts have stalled to fix what safety advocates call a broken recall system, the CPSC has become more aggressive in trying to warn the public. So far, this fiscal year, issuing more than double the number of warnings it did last year, and on track to issue slightly more recalls. For Spotlight on America, I'm Angie Moreski.
Angie, thank you. And coming up, we are giving you a first look at the newest pandas to enter the United States in over 2 decades. We're back in just 90 seconds. Well, we are getting our first look at the San Diego Zoo's newest arrivals, these 2 giant pandas who arrived from China last month. They are the first new giant panda pair to enter the country in 2 decades. Yun Tuan is a nearly 5-year-old male who enjoys climbing and exploring. Xin Bao is a nearly 4-year-old female who enjoys sunbathing and eating her favorite foods. I don't blame her. That sounds like a vacation. The pandas are on loan from China, all part of the country's panda diplomacy, a long-running token of goodwill meant to signify friendship between the 2 countries. And since their arrival in the Golden State, the zoo says they are, quote, acclimating well to their new home in a private habitat and will not be viewable to the public for several weeks. But more pandas are expected across the United States at different zoos, including in Washington, D.C. at the Smithsonian Zoo by the end of the year. And that does it for this edition of the National Desk. We do invite you to join us again this evening for more coverage on America's top stories. Just check your local listings for times. I'm Amira David. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great night.